a little bit for us to get our engine started here, or warmed up. Feel free to speak. There's no right or wrong answer. But I ask for you, friends, what is meditation?
Good question.
Good question.
Connection with a superior spirit.
A connection with superior spirits. Okay. Sylvia?
I'd say a connection with our inside first.
Our connection with our inside.
Opening for others.
With an opening for others. Okay, a connection with inside first and an opening for others. Okay. Klebit?
Meditation would be silence of your own mind when you can just relax and stop thinking and just be quiet.
Silencing our own mind. Okay. Anything else about what meditation can be? Fine. Why should we meditate?
To calm down.
Yes, that's a big one, especially in our society today, right? To calm down. Why else should we meditate?
To quiet our monkey mind.
To quiet our monkey mind, yes. The monkeys that are jumping from branch to branch in our brain, right? Our thoughts that are all over the place. We're going to talk about that kind of monkey type of brain when we examine the difference between open thoughts, open circuit thoughts, and closed circuit thoughts in something that the spirit André Luiz talks about in the book Mechanics of Mediumship. So it's a very good point. Why else should we meditate?
To get perspective.
To gain perspective. Okay. Meaning?
Meaning, if you have a problem, you meditate and you relax, and then you can start again.
Okay, so it's like a reset, right? Beautiful, very nice. Anybody else for number 2?
Connect to ourselves.
To connect to ourselves.
To listen to inspiration and guidance.
To listen to inspiration and guidance. All right, great. How many types of meditation are there?
I don't know.
Lots. Endless. There's no right or wrong answer. Feel free. How many?
I don't really know.
Well, we're not looking for a number here. Types, right?
Different types of meditation?
Different types, yeah.
Walking, sitting.
Walking, sitting, guided meditation, silent meditation.
I know there is an active meditation here in New York because a guy who stayed in my house, he came for that class. They do kind of dance movements, but it's meditation in motion.
So there's physical meditations like yoga, tai chi, and other practices that involve a physical movement, but also a mental part, right? So there are many. Some involve chanting, some involve silence, some involve prayer. Okay, what does science say about meditation? What does Google say about meditation?
It helps.
It helps. Helps with what?
Improve your health.
Improve your health.
Your awareness.
Yes. Our health, our awareness, physical improvements, right?
Centered.
They have been measured. And Spiritism. Anybody would like to offer what Spiritism says about meditation?
Balance your chakras.
Balancing our chakras could be. Okay. All right, that was good. That was a nice warm-up. So then, let's get right to it with a quick disclaimer about what the purposes of the lecture are today, and also about the purposes of what me as a lecturer on meditation is. I'm not an expert on meditation. I am, like everyone else here, attempting to practice it on my daily life. Sometimes I am successful, sometimes I'm not. And there are times when I will go a few days without practicing meditation, and I will notice the difference in my day. And there are times when I'm able to follow a daily practice for a few weeks, and I notice the effect. So the goal for the lecture 2 here is not for everyone to leave as expert meditation practitioners here. That's not the point. The point here is just for us to see how meditation can be just another means to an end, and how we can incorporate it in our toolkit. And this is paraphrasing Paulo, our friend Paulo, who made this beautiful analogy about Spiritism as a toolkit, so that this being another tool that we can add to our Spiritism toolkit. So some of which including prayer, including studying of the books, extracting important lessons from it, attending the meetings and sharing and learning from each other, going to the charitable activities so we can donate our time and practice compassion with others, etc. For some is educating our mediumship, if that's applicable. So another tool for the Spiritism Toolkit is also meditation, and that's what we aim to encourage and inspire you friends. Leave here today, start to think about it and how it best suits your life and how you can best adjust it to your suitability, what you feel is best. So with that in mind, I would just want to make clear also for those of us that may be watching that we're not going to go into a mystical or esoteric look of meditation. We're going to look at meditation strictly from a viewpoint of Spiritism, which is what Kardec prescribed us, with reason, rational faith, and common sense. And we're going to extract the essential benefits of meditation and its practice, but we're also going to make efforts to remove, in this process, any mystical or esoteric baggage that may come with it. What I'm saying is that we're not necessarily going to be delving into the different chanting and mantras and the different traditions that are all very noble and very respectable, but simply don't apply to our practice of Spiritism. While it's important for us to understand them, it's not as important for us to actually practice them. Is that clear? Right? Okay, so with that in mind, some of the goals of this meditation lecture will be for us to use meditation in our daily lives as a means to an end, like I said, and to aid in our mental development. We're going to talk about this. It's not intellectual or moral development. It's our mental development. Third one, how it can aid in our concentration, how it can aid in our prayers. As we pray regularly as Spiritists, how we can have our prayers become more effective with the tool of meditation. How with meditation we can better study the books to extract the essential teachings of the books with the use of meditation. For the whole process of our inner renewal and inner transformation, which Spiritism invites us to do on a daily basis. And for some, if we are more ostensive mediums, how meditation can be very helpful in educating your mediumship. And for those of you that actually are practicing your mediumship in our center or elsewhere, how meditation can help you to in your process of mediumship development. Yes, that's the disclaimer. Any questions so far? Are we all good? Are we all about to fall asleep because the lights are off and it's the end of this weekend and it's a nice day? Okay. It's okay if you fall asleep as long as you're meditating about the lecture in your sleep. Okay, so something that we love to do is examine the root origin of the word. And in it we discover incredible information about how that word really applies in our day-to-day conversation. So we're going to look at the etymology of the word meditation. Etymology, for those of you that don't know, is the study of how words change their meaning throughout time. And the synonyms, of course, what are some similar words to meditation. So we break the word meditation into its radical, meditate, and we examine where the med comes from. We see in Latin that med means to measure, limit, consider, advise. And then before Latin, we see where Greek uses the radical med in some very, very different ways, such as medestai, to think about, medon, ruler. That's an interesting one. Ruler comes from the same radical as med. So like ruler of our own mind, ruler of our own thoughts, right? Mederi, to heal. Medicus, physician. Medomai, to be mindful of. And medein, again, to rule. So we see how all of those usages of the med radical in Greek are very interestingly close to meditation, but go beyond it, including ruler, including physician, medicine. So there are medicinal factors to meditation, right? And then with some synonyms here that we see: contemplate, think, reflect, muse, be deep, lost in thought, and pray. So meditation is synonymous with prayer depending on how you look at it, depending on the context. So other definitions of meditation that we found, depending on where you come from and how you approach it, could be to build internal energy or life force, and some traditions call that chi energy or prana, or us spiritists, the universal cosmic fluid, how we can absorb that better. Involves an internal effort to self-regulate the mind in some way, and as a result reduces, and that's scientifically proven, high blood pressure lowers, depression, anxiety. There are some studies that even conclude that meditation can help in our weight loss. And that makes sense, because if we are practicing meditation on a regular basis, it means we're more aware of our thoughts. And when we approach a plate of food, we tend to be calmer and more conscious, and we tend not to devour that plate as quickly and as unconsciously as sometimes we would if we were not practicing meditation. So it makes sense because we lose weight. So being awake without being aware of anything except awareness itself is another definition. So there are dozens of definitions to the word meditation, but basically we see a little bit of their etymology here. And now we're going to take a look at how we see meditation present in every single religious tradition in the world, and is as old as civilization and humanity itself. It's almost like a reflex of our human attributes, right? The same way that the act of worshiping something outside of ourselves started way back during the caveman years, when they realized that a person died, and they instinctively began to worship something outside of themselves as a way to respect the person that had just died, and worshiping fire and things like that. The practice of meditation goes as far back as that, time immemorial. And I just highlighted just a few here. In the tradition of the Holy Vedas, the Hindu texts, is where we find the earliest references to the words meditation, where they prescribe specific mantras that the practitioner is supposed to chant repeatedly, with the purpose of inducing himself or herself in a state of concentration, in a trance, right? We see also the word meditation in Tibetan, meaning the word is gom, G-O-M, and that word literally means to become familiar with, and has the strong implications of training the mind to be familiar with states that are beneficial, such as concentration, compassion, correct understanding, patience, humility, perseverance. We see the word meditation being used in the Old Testament books several times, and the Hebrew word for it is Haga, and I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. I hope I am. Haga means to sigh, to murmur, to ponder. It's very interesting because those meanings of the word Haga, in Hebrew, the same word may have many meanings. This is why sometimes translations of the Old Testament books have been so controversial, because depending on how careful the translator is, he or she may change the meaning of the text by not being attentive to how it's used in the context, the cultural context of the time. So the word Haga, meaning to sigh, is also implying breathing, which is an essential component of any meditative practice. And interestingly enough, the word wind and breathing in Hebrew is also the same word for spirit. It's the same thing in Greek, pneuma. The same word they used for spirit, pneuma, also means wind. Let's remember that for the future slides here. That's quite beautiful how we find this similarity in the usage. So in Hinduism and Buddhism here, the practice is called dhyana in Sanskrit, which means to contemplate or meditate. And that's where the Buddhists also emphasize the concept of nirvana. How many of you are familiar with the word nirvana, right? So the word nirvana actually means to be blown out, like a candle that is blown out. Because the Buddhists understand that you only reach that level once all of your desires, like a fire, have been extinguished. Once that happens, you are able to have the ability, right, to reach the nirvana. So the Buddhists, the central theme of Buddhism is a very introspective religion, and they prescribe meditation as a key central practice in their lives, because they understand that with that, you are able to seize your desires. They understand that our suffering comes from our desires. When we have desires, that causes suffering. And meditation is one of the most powerful tools in their tradition for the cessation of those desires. And the Hindu tradition of Buddhism also talks about nirvana as a stage where the spirit no longer has to go through the cycles of birth and death, of reincarnation. The spirit has already left this cycle and is in a higher stage, right? Including here in Islam, there is the Sufist movement of Islam, which is considered to be the inner mystical dimension of Islam. And all of those that practice Sufism are Muslims themselves, and many of their practices are very akin to meditation, including the practice called murahaba, which means literally to be vigilant. We're going to see that concept later in Christianity and meditation, to be vigilant. And in this practice of murahaba, they basically collect all of their bodily senses. They prescribe the follower to stay in a state of concentration and cut himself off from all preoccupations and notions that inflict themselves upon the heart. And then once you reach that state, he's able to turn himself fully consciousness towards God Most High. We see in Confucianism and in Taoism, the Tao Te Ching, which TJ and I love to study, there is such a huge emphasis placed on how things happen and our awareness of things happening around us. It's all about being aware, present to the moment. Ancient Greeks practiced meditation. This is a picture of the Oracle of Delphi, where the famous teaching, know thyself, comes from. Some of us sometimes think that Christ said that, know thyself. It actually came from the Oracle of Delphi. And there they helped the apprentices to practice what they called kenosis. Kenosis is one-pointed awareness. And the root word kenosis is also shared in Sanskrit with the word samadhi, which describes the deepest state of meditation. So back then, they were already practicing that. And of course, the Egyptians practiced meditation in their rituals, which were closed to the general public. Even though to the outward public they were polytheistic, to the small initiated circles, they had the understanding of monotheism, and they actually had incredible mediumistic communications with the spirit realm, and they used meditation practices to better facilitate this interaction with the spirit realm. So we see that it's present in every single tradition. Well, we didn't talk about one tradition here. Which one?
Christianity.
There you go. We saved the best for last. No, I'm kidding. Just a joke. Just a joke. Meditation in Christianity. Interestingly enough, the word meditation itself is never mentioned in the New Testament. But there are passages of Christ that clearly talk about the need for meditation when we are praying. And so that's where contemplation, a state of grace, And all of those other attributes of Christian practice come from. So we'll see here an example in the Catholic tradition of the rosaries. The rosaries, as you know, are beads that you pray exactly the same prayer 15 times, and then you do a Holy Mary. So it is a ritual, right? But also it has a meditative goal in mind, because it helps the person that's praying to go into a state of repetitive concentration, which is akin to getting into trance, right? A meditative trance. Of course, we understand in Spiritism that the time spent in an activity like that is really only worthwhile if the person is fully present and fully feeling, heartfelt feelings on the prayers. If they're just reciting out loud without focusing their minds, then it becomes a futile exercise, right? But in the Eastern Orthodox Christian tradition, something called hesychasm developed, and it can be seen as early as the 4th century AD. And it's the tradition that has been the process of retiring inward by ceasing to register the senses in order to achieve an experiential knowledge of God. It's also known as the practice of inner prayer, aiming at union with God on a level beyond images, concepts, and language. He's basically describing meditation here. When we enter into profound states of concentration where there is total stillness, we start to experience what it's like to be one with God, one with ourselves. It's what Christ recommended, that the kingdom of heaven is inside you, right? It's when we are able to go into ourselves and we are able to discover that place inside of ourselves. And this tradition only started in Christianity because of this specific passage by Matthew, where Christ is advising the disciples about prayer and how to pray effectively. And he says, when you pray, go into your room, and when you have shut the door, pray. Right? Going into our room. What do we mean by that? Right? We've spoken about this a few times. Be still and know that I am God is extracted from Psalm 46 of David, and is also a very powerful passage in the Old Testament where we're basically fusing ourselves with God. At the end of that psalm, David is basically saying that God is going to come and say to all, God will be proclaimed in all nations. So don't worry, all is well. Be still and know that I am God. It's not only God talking to David, but it's also David being completely still and knowing that he is God himself. Following the tradition that Jesus said to his disciples, you are gods, meaning you are co-creators with the absolute creator who's your Father, right? In order to get to that stage, a lot of tools are necessary, one of which can include meditation, which helps, right? So going into your room means that we have to develop that. We just don't go into our rooms mentally, right? And begin a process of prayer very quickly. It takes practice. And if we are to start practicing meditation, we will notice that we're going to go through basically 3 stages. For those that never meditated, for those that have dabbled in it here and there, and for those that have practiced meditation for a long time, they're going to notice where they stand when they realize this metaphor, this symbol of the room. So imagine a room in your house. Where do you feel most comfortable in your house? Is it in your bedroom, in your living room, right? Imagine entering that space when that space is beautifully clean. Everything is in its right place. It smells, it's a fragrance, it's pure, right? Don't we feel better? Don't we feel, we sigh, like the Hebrew Haggah. It's so nice to be here, right? So that doesn't happen magically, right? We have to do a little housekeeping. We have to do a little cleaning. The same idea happens with our mind. When we go into our room, The first stage of a practice of meditation is literally going into the room and starting to clean it. So restoring things to its beautiful place, restoring them to a way where we're going to feel so comfortable and so re-energized we're into this room. That's a process, and that's the first stage. The second stage of practicing meditation we're going to notice is that when we start actually practice the meditation, we will realize that it'll be easier to enter this room. And when we enter that room, the room will already be clean, will already be beautiful, will already be restored. So it'll be easier to get in and out of that state of meditation, the therapeutic stages. And then the third stage is when we're actually able to get that room, beautiful as it is, and take it with us wherever we go. We never leave that room mentally, emotionally per se. That's our inner sanctuary. That's the kingdom of heaven that Christ talks about. And we are able to bring that to every interaction, to every person we're with an email at work, with interacting with our family members. We stay with that room inside, healthy, protected, right? So what does that imply? Anybody have any questions so far? Feel free to interrupt. Is it going too fast? Is it going too slow? Okay, are we all awake so far? Okay, good. That's a good sign. So André Luiz talks about this in the book Mechanics of Mediumship, which has not yet been published yet, but it's in the process of being revised, and it'll be published soon by Odyssey of America. The idea of mental development is discussed a little bit there, and he has a specific part in chapter 25 where he describes our situation and how important it is for us to focus on our thoughts. He says, seen from afar, human beings in the physical realm may be compared to travelers in a jungle of heterogeneous thoughts. The monkey brains that you mentioned, right? The monkey thoughts, heterogeneous thoughts. And they learn by means of rigorous exercises to find their own way to freedom and ascesis. We're going to look about what that word means. They are mentally exposed to all sorts of psychic influences. So it is crucial that they educate themselves to control their impulses, growing morally and intellectually to improve their thought projections. Improve our divine potential as co-creators in a conscious way, not in an unconscious way, right? So what is he basically saying here? Ascesis, by the way, is the practice of severe self-discipline, typically for religious reasons. It comes from the Greek askesis, meaning training, to exercise. So we see in India, both in ancient India as well as today's India, a lot of ascetics, right? And they're usually very, very skinny because they eat very, very little. And they sit all day basically in state of contemplation, meditation, and they don't really participate in our day-to-day society per se. They're practicing a very rigorous self-discipline. It's same idea here for us, that rigorous self-discipline that we impose upon ourselves. And it implies a preparation for everything that we do in life. And this preparation here has to do with our mental house, our mental development. How do we start a task? Do we mentally prepare for it, right? If we do so, we're able to improve the thought projections, and at the same time, we're able to protect ourselves from these psychic influences, from the bombardment of everyday life. This is especially important in today's world, when our attention spans are so short and fragmented because of technology. How many of us walk around the city with our phones? Are we being vigilant in that moment? Are we being aware of what we're doing in that moment? No, we are immersed in that phone. And we're not necessarily conscious of our thoughts. We're walking around. Before we know it, we look up and sometimes we stumble and fall, right? So the input of technology is so intense today that we are starting to condition our minds to think in smaller and smaller bits. And those distractions are just getting bigger and bigger. So the longer contemplations, the longer reflections, the continuous stream of thought that used to happen more naturally in older days, modern life is basically squeezing those opportunities out because we're constantly connected, constantly receiving input from everywhere. Do you think that aids our ability to practice meditation? No, it makes it harder, because when we go into meditation, we are already thinking about all of these things and we're all bombarded by them. So it's important to have this idea of the vigilance, of being aware. Because just like the go into your room and shut the door, meaning disconnect from what happened in the past, from what may happen in the future, from what happened during your day, shut the door of that room so that you can be in the present moment. Just like that recommendation, Christ also gave the recommendation of the watch and pray, right? Or sometimes in Portuguese they say, pray and watch, or be vigilant. The order is really not important. What is important here is the spirit of this teaching. What is for us to understand here? When we are walking around, are we conscious? Are we attentive of our thoughts? Or are we basically asleep? Because the word watch and pray in the context of the New Testament comes from, in Latin, vigilance, which means vigilia. What is vigilia? It's to be awake, literally not sleeping. So when we are awake, we are watching. Now, I'm awake right now, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I am vigilant in the watch and pray sense. And that's what meditation can help us in making sure that the quality of our watchfulness, of our mindfulness, is improved. So that when we realize that we are not vibrating in the most elevated thoughts, when we're feeling negative emotions, we are more aware of those and we can take the medicine, which is prayer. And then change our vibrations, right? So in the book Mechanics of Mediumship, André Luiz, in the chapter 9 regarding the brain and energy, he makes a beautiful analogy about a direct current generator, like an electrical generator machine, and how our brain works. And so he uses the comparison to describe what a machine does when it's in an open circuit versus a closed circuit. And he compares that with our brains when we are vibrating in inattentive thoughts, the monkey state. It's just doing its own thing and we are not there consciously controlling it, versus closed circuit, which is attentive thoughts, concentration, stream of consciousness, right? So he says that when we are in continuous thoughts, in closed circuit and concentrations, it allows the production of a thought current, which results in the creation of residual magnetism. Residual magnetism, for those that are electric engineers here, not me, this is a very hard concept for me to understand. I'm hoping that I'm transmitting it in the right way, but basically, a direct current generator, when is operating in a closed circuit only, is able to speed up its voltage and increase its ability to produce energy. And in that process, it creates what it's called residual magnetism. Residual magnetism is responsible, for example, in the engine of a car. When you park the car at night and the next day you're going to take the car out, there is still residual magnetism there, which allows the engine to start again. And when we are accelerating through the highway, the process of accelerating speed produces residual magnetism and allows the engine to continue speeding up, right? He compares that creation of residual magnetism to our brain. And he says that when we are in closed circuit concentrated thoughts, we create this residual magnetism, which in the field of our personality allows us to expand our mental creative force. The same way the voltage in an electric generator builds up with the help of this residual magnetism. Thus, by remaining in closed circuit, in other words, concentrated, we can increase the flow of our mental creative currents and maintain continuous thoughts, operating with maximum strength or voltage in the case of the machine. And here's where it's beautiful. Until we go past the saturation point, machines do that, and so does our brain. And then it requires less power in the direction of our objectives according to our desires. This past the saturation point, it's basically that third stage of meditation we just talked about. Have you noticed how all the sages and the elevated spirits that walk this planet, like Sai Baba, like Mother Teresa, like Gandhi, like our dear Chico Xavier, all had one thing in common, or like the Dalai Lama? They're always so serene. They're always so peaceful. They are in this point. They went past the saturation point of their brains when less power is required for them to operate. So it's as if they go through their interactions in an effortless way, right? Which does not mean that they're powerless. It's actually much more powerful, but it just requires less, right? We can get to that place too when we build up enough practice of our meditation, of our concentration, that we get to a point where this residual magnetism, right, that they talk about here in the field of our personality, is so much that it just becomes effortless. Now, this is a very deep concept, and we can have a whole lecture about this book alone. We're just giving a little bit of a glimpse because we have to continue. But does it make sense? Yes? If not, we can have the Q&A at the end where we can talk about it more. All right, so then let's look at the actual brain activity during meditation. So they've been able to detect through scanning techniques how our brain changes in its activity before and after a 10-minute meditation. What they found is two things. Meditation increases activity in the prefrontal cortex of the brain. This is the prefrontal cortex of the brain. This is the area known as the executive function. It's the most advanced part of our brain. Only the mammal species has it. And it's responsible for planning complex cognitive behavior, personality expression, decision making, and moderating our social behavior. So these are all decisions related to high levels of discernment, right? The basic activity of this part of the brain is considered to be the orchestration of thoughts and actions in accordance with our internal goals. So it speaks to a high level of awareness in this part of our brain, right? They go into the differences here. So basically, the prefrontal cortex is where our spirit, our higher self in some traditions, as you call, can imprint its activity here. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, the area at the very end, at the back of our brains here, also known as the reptilian brain, is where all of our primitive animal instincts reside. So our fears, our depressions, anxieties, all of those are manifested in the physical brain right here in this area. Interesting, they found that meditation increases activity in the prefrontal cortex and at the same time reduces activity in the reptilian brain. So it's literally the brain starts to show how the spirit is helping to spiritualize itself and how the brain is affected by that. More activity in the executive, discerning, high-level functions, less activity in the primitive, animalistic, instinctive part of our brain. So we see here a few of the waves that the brain emits in different states. And some of these waves have shown that they improve our immune system, that they reduce our blood pressure. And so the beta waves are the regular waves that we emit when we are doing awake, normal, alert consciousness. So I'm here, I'm talking to you guys, I'm walking on the street. This is beta waves that our brain is emitting. Then we go into alpha waves that the brain starts to produce when we are in relaxed, calm, lucid states. When we're starting to pray, when we start to enter meditation, we go into that altered state of consciousness, we are producing alpha waves, which are very beneficial. In Portuguese, we actually have an expression. We say, oh, that person is in alpha. Ele está em alpha, right? They're really referring to this. He's in a very calm, very deep place. Then you have the theta waves, which occur when you have deep relaxation and meditation, and when you're having mental imagery, so with visualizations. Interesting, the theta waves happen when we're daydreaming. So it's interesting that you can see, for example, the phenomenon of driving down the road, and then you suddenly don't realize what just happened in the last 5 miles that you were driving, right? And suddenly go, oh wow, I'm already here in this exit. Or I missed my exit, right? Or when we're washing dishes, and suddenly we have this epiphany, some idea comes in our minds, like, oh, you know. The theta waves are happening when we're having these motor skills, with these activities that we've done so many times that the brain literally doesn't need to be constantly there to help us. So when we're brushing our teeth and things like that, the brain goes into this theta stage, which is this daydreaming stage, which is also very helpful. And then finally, the delta waves are when we're deeply sleeping without any dreams. So what we can make the comparison here is, how many of you have heard of the symbol, the analogy of the horse, the carriage, and the coachman? Have you guys ever have you ever heard that image, right? So imagine a carriage with a horse and the coachman on top. This image is used many times to describe the differences between our spirit and our physical body and our animal tendencies, right? So the carriage is our physical body today. The horse is all of our animalistic tendencies, all of the things that are in the reptilian part of our brain, right? All of the desires that the Buddhists talk about. The coachman is what some traditions call the higher self, the incarnate spirit that has wisdom that it acquired through thousands of lives, never loses those virtues, even though sometimes it can't access all of them, but it's still there. That's the spirit that is incredibly wise. And when Christ says you were created in the likeness and image of God, he's referring to that part, not the horse, right? We were talking about the likeness and image of God, of that spirit, which is the coachman, who is what? Steering the horse, right? When we let the horse steer the carriage, what happens? Goes wild. That's right. The carriage threatens to lose control, to run amok. When the coachman is driving the carriage, it controls the horses. It can guide the carriage. So that's the idea here. When we practice meditation, we are slowly transitioning from the horse controlling the carriage and allowing the coachman to do more of the controlling, right? It's gradual, but that's one of the goals of meditation. So now let's look at what Spiritism has to say specifically about meditation. And with that, I highly recommend the books that Givaldo channeled with the Spirit author Joanna De Angelis, who's also his guide. She has incredible books about meditation. And the Spiritist Society of Baltimore, with the coordination of Dr. Vanessa Anceloni, actually prepared a few audio CDs and audio podcasts where Mr. Gregory Stewart, who has a very soothing voice and a voice that does not have an English accent because he's actually American, where they narrate some chapters. So in it we see how pertinent, how important the practice of meditation is to our daily practice of Spiritism itself. So rather than me talking, because you guys are by now really tired of hearing my voice, we're going to let Gregory talk through the audio, a sample we're going to read. And we're going to let that be already a preparation for us to go into our guided visualization in the end. So, do we have any questions so far? How are we doing? I noticed that the time is good. I thought I was going to run out of time. It looks like we have some time. Ajay.
Good to be in the theta state of mind. You said that after alpha it was theta.
They say that in the alpha state, we're more aware of our thoughts. So the theta state is when we're daydreaming, which doesn't necessarily mean that we are conscious of what's going on. It's just that when we are involved in manual tasks that we don't have to think about so hard, like washing dishes and stuff, brushing our teeth, our brain starts emitting theta waves because it doesn't have to be physically there. It goes elsewhere. That's actually the spirit that's doing that. And science is looking at a reflex of the spirit's imprint on the brain, right? Producing theta waves. Because we are spirits temporarily in a physical body. So of course, the minute that we have a chance to escape the physical body or distance ourselves a little bit, the spirit will want to do that. It's normal. So in those manual tasks that is done in a repeatedly where it doesn't have to be aware and doing it consciously, the theta waves are basically a reflection of the spirit wanting to daydream, wanting to go to other places. But it's not necessarily the best. If you want to look at those 4 waves, what you really want to focus on is the alpha waves, which is calm, lucid states of relaxation, right? Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. Any more questions so far? Everyone's in deep meditation. Yes, sir.
Sometimes when you're in a state of consciousness of your thoughts, you become so aware of I personally become so aware of my thoughts that I feel like I stopped myself from thinking. Because there's no, because I'm so aware of them and I kind of track them. So at the same time I kind of stop them. So I don't know if it's a question. I'm just wondering
okay.
I'm just wondering, I guess, yeah, I don't think it's a question.
We can come back. TJ?
I had a question regarding the, is it IESS?
Ascesis.
IESS.
Mm-hmm.
Is that in any relationship to the Jewish traditions? Ascetic?
It could be. I honestly don't know the answer to your question, TJ. I've only heard the concept of ascetics connected to the Hindu traditions of the ascetics in ancient India, practicing a very rigorous discipline, and that's why they're called ascetics. It may have something to do with the Hebrew tradition, but I honestly don't know. Do you know something that you want to share about it?
I don't think it. I think it sounds like Hasidic, but it's not.
Oh.
Hasidic means to worship God. So, yeah.
Well, since you mentioned the same way we looked at the inner mystical side of Islam, known as Sufism, the inner mystical side of Judaism is Kabbalah. And in Kabbalah, they practice meditation a lot, including a certain mantra, if you will. I don't think they use that word for it, but the Ein Sof, meaning I am. And that awareness of being one with God. And I am is something that they emphasize a lot. They also emphasize the focusing on certain Hebrew words that correspond to different chakras of our body as ways to activate them. But I'm not a master at all of Kabbalah. I know very little about it. But I do know that as the inner mystical aspect of Judaism, it has a lot about meditation in it. So, do you want to go back to your question? Or?
I think it was just kind of thought.
It was just some thought projections, right? Thank you for projecting your thoughts with us.
Osho wrote a book, I Am.
Osho.
Yeah,
Osho, yes.
He wrote a book, I Am, a whole book on I Am.
On I Am.
Talks about all of this and goes back to Vedic and other religions who talks about I Am.
Right.
It's called I am.
Called I am. And there is such a wealth of material that stems from the religious traditions of ancient India and Hindu. And today we have people like Deepak Chopra and Eckhart Tolle and so many spiritualist teachers that are extracting some of the beautiful traditions of Hinduism and showing how we can apply them to our daily lives through practices like meditation, right? We can go on and more about it, but I think, I don't know how we're doing it on time. It's 7 o'clock.
Can you talk a little bit about the differences between visualization and meditation?
So a visualization is a form of guided meditation, right? So in our case here, we're going to do a guided meditation because there will be one person who's going to be guiding the process and who's going to use visualization techniques so that we are able to focus our minds on those visualizations. So the visualization implies that we're not only going to rely on our seeing sense, but we're going to hopefully enrich that visualization with hearing, with smell, even with, how's this one called? Taste, thank you. With the taste sense, so that you enrich the experience and you allow yourself to be fully in it as a way to focus your attention on it. So the visualization has that goal. The guided meditation could be, so you can have, for example, you can be meditated by yourself and you can rely on visualizations. So I can be in my room, breathing in and out, focusing my attention on my breath. And as I do that, if I stay conscious and connected to that, then I can start relying on a visualization. So I want to visualize a peaceful lake, peaceful beach. I can visualize a figure of our guardian angel, a figure of Christ, of Buddha, of Shiva, whatever it is that brings you peace and comfort. And in that visualization, you're wanting to focus your mind in that and extract from the visual healing resources, healing energy to allow you to stay focused. So visualizations can be guided or not guided. Does that answer your question? Okay. No? Still good? All right. Just scratching her back. All right. So are we ready to hear what Joanna Giangelis has to say about it, about meditation? Okay. So let's set that up.
Let us read a chapter from the book, Moments of Meditation, dictated by the Spirit Joanna Giangelis. Modern life is full of entertainment and lacks spirituality. It is dragging humankind towards the exterior, to the playthings of senses, in detriment of harmony that should be the basis for any realization. Without harmony, all that we achieve falls apart because those achievements are ephemeral. Many hallucinating people are thrown into the trenches of society. The anxious, depressed, and unsatisfied follow them, illustrating the failure of ethico-moral values and the high technological ambitions that do not make human beings happy. The breakdown and absurdities are everywhere, running freely together with corruption of all types. And those things are conspiring against ideals of nobility, justice, and harmony of life. There is a great disbelief of humankind in itself, and a terrible indifference for tomorrow that is pushing human beings to experience a public hopelessness which threatens culture, civilization, family, and marriage. Reserve periodically moments for meditation. Meditation is an imperious necessity that imposes itself before any realization. In the meditative state, You calm down your emotions and clarify your discernment. When we harmonize our feelings, we don't need to alienate ourselves in order to run away from our commitments that we should fulfill due to our social and human responsibilities. However, we should reserve some mental space and time in order to achieve this realization. Start your training by meditating daily in the thoughts of Christ, and try to retain those thoughts by repetition and applying them to your daily conduct. Increase little by little the time you dedicate to meditation in order to tame your undomesticated thoughts and quiet down your unaccustomed body. Physical sensations and distractions that appear one by one should be taken care of calmly while keeping your mind attuned to the central idea until you overcome all distractions. Meditation should be attentive, but not tense or rigid. Concentrate while placing yourself in a comfortable position that does not allow you to fall asleep. Make every effort to fight against your inferior desires and lower inclinations. Choose a place that is tranquil and pleasant and also available to you on a regular basis, thus enriching your psychosphere with the superior quality of your aspirations. Reserve a calm hour when you feel rested. Invade the unknown country of your mind. At first, reflect without judging or censoring, as if you are a harmonical observer witnessing an event that cannot be avoided. Breathe calmly, feeling the air that blesses your life. Find the company of people who are morally healthy, wise, and harmonizing for you. Some days will be more difficult than others for this exercise of meditation. The training, however, will be responsible for the efficacious results. Don't fight against your thoughts, but conquer them patiently. The practice will become so natural that whenever you face a challenge or problem, you will be conducted to the predominant idea in yourself, which is the tranquility of discernment. Gandhi used to fast in peace for several days without suffering from mental disturbances because he used to meditate on those kinds of occasions. Jesus, during the 40 days of fasting, kept himself attuned to God and foresaw the testimonial of Gethsemane. When in profound meditation he prayed and allowed himself to be arrested by the hands of injustice through the great testimonial he offered to humanity.
It's beautiful, right? It's not a meditation itself, but these are tips and ways that we can reflect on the importance of meditation. And being a Christ-based doctrine, Spiritism, of course, will emphasize the thoughts of Christ as a roadmap for us to get into states of meditation. And so Joanna here is offering for us to think of thoughts of Christ, such as love your neighbor as you love yourself, don't judge others lest ye be judged, and those evangelical teachings as tools for us to, during the day, reconnect with those teachings and repeat them to ourselves and connect with that teaching, not just intellectually, but also emotionally and also mentally, remembering the mental development aspect, right? So we're not here to offer a manual on how you should meditate, because that's a discovery you're going to make by yourself. This is a practice that is individual, and what we do want to recommend here are just some basic tools, highlight the importance, and basically say a few of the key components of meditation, which involve our breathing, right? So to consciously breathe, how many breaths do you think we take in a single day that are actual conscious breaths?
No.
Very, very little, right? Maybe half of 1% of all the breaths we take during the day are conscious breathing. And when we're not breathing consciously, guess what? We're actually not breathing right. Breathing consciously first implies breathing completely in and completely out, so that we oxygenate as much as we can all of our cells. And with the oxygen that comes, we're able to produce all kinds of healing elements for every single cell of our bodies. When we're not breathing consciously, how are we breathing? Doggy breathing. I love it. That's a great way to describe it. Doggy breathing. It's very short, the cycle of breath, meaning there's very little oxygen going in. So we're basically not helping our process of being awake because we're not giving enough oxygen to ourselves. Awake, I mean not asleep, awake in the sense of vigilance, right, that we were talking about earlier, or mindfulness. So a key component to entering a state of mindfulness is taking complete breaths, whole complete cycle. And furthermore, taking breaths using our diaphragm. Because when we use our diaphragm for taking a complete breath, we're able to take in more air in a better quality as opposed to the doggy breaths that we do unconsciously, right? So that's a key component. And we can start our practice any way we want because there's no right or wrong way. But for us who are very busy in our daily lives, if we can't at first find a time of day or a place in our homes where there is enough tranquility and privacy, then we can, on our way to work in the subway, because we are blessed with the fact that we don't need to drive in the city, most of us, that we're letting the conductor of the train do the driving for us, we can take that opportunity to practice meditation. All we really need is just a set of headphones if you need to block out the noise from the outside and focus on your breathing. If it's just 5-10 minutes on your way to work, focus on your breathing. Breathe completely. Be conscious of the air entering your nostrils and exiting your body as you exhale. Just doing that practice alone will allow you to start entering into a state of mental concentration, which is the closed circuit thoughts, the attentive thoughts that we talked about. And with practice, we gradually will start building what André Luiz starts to call that residual magnetism, right? Which will then lead to the whole development of the process we talked about. So these are just, apologies for the microphone. Hope it's okay. Let me just put it here. Can you hear me? Okay, sorry about that. So that's just a starter kit for our practicing of meditation. So let's now do a guided visualization so we can conclude our meeting. And what we're going to do is basically, hopefully, go into a deep state of concentration, what we can call even trance. We're not talking about a mediumistic trance, we're talking about an inner trance, an inner state of concentration and relaxation. And in it, as Angie described, we're going to be doing our passes for the evening. Remembering these two recommendations provided in the New and the Old Testament. When you pray, go into your room, and when you have shut the door, pray. For us, it's very hard to talk about meditation without incorporating prayer because they're so connected. One can really benefit from the other. So be still and know that I am God. It's only in that inner stillness that you are really able to connect and discover the divine essence that we have inside. So in that we know that we are God in that sense.